Good morning, and welcome to the Financial Optimist. Today, I'm going to be doing a reaction video to Dave Ramsey, so without further ado, let's jump right in.
We're prepping our will right now, and we're disagreeing on one thing, and that is our house, with what to do with the house after when we're gone. He has two kids, I have two kids, they're all adults, nobody under 18. And we have two kids which live in different states, so they're gone. We have two living at home, they're 34.
Okay, so when it comes to living at home versus living on your own, one thing to consider is, of course, the average rental price. And when it comes to rent by state, you look at this chart here, you see some states could be, well over $2,000, almost $3,000. Some other places are on average only about $1,000 or a little bit more. I live down here in Florida, so that's around $2,000 per month is the average there. And so you look at that, you go, okay, if you want to live out at home, you do have to make some good money, because rent is way more expensive than it used to be even just a few years ago. So before moving out, you got to have a plan of some kind and go, okay, how am I going to afford this kind of rent? And so let's go ahead and go back to the video now and see what else is going on.
They're just having a hard time just trying to get an apartment that they can live in right now. So he wants to sell the house straight down the middle and between everybody and just sell the house right out. My disagreement is that if anything happened to us tomorrow, that would leave two of the boys kicked out of the house with nowhere to go. We're going to have our house paid off.
They're 34.
In 5 years. Yeah, 34, you bet.
Maybe it's time to do that anyway.
Okay, so when it comes to what is the appropriate age to leave your parents' house, I recently made a video about that, but there's a few things to consider. Now let's look at, for example, these numbers here. This is more of an international perspective. Is where you look at the European and Americans, ages 18 to 34, how many live with the parents. This chart shows about 33% of U.S. adults, so about a third of young adults live with the parents. But you look at the European countries, the vast majority of them, a lot more of them live with their parents. Some of them, it's 3 out of 4. So those are some very, very big numbers. And mind you, many of these countries are, fairly well-off European nations. And so if they have a fairly good economy, we would think, why aren't they moving out of their parents' house? Well, partly it's cultural. In America, we have a very strong culture of independence, taking care of ourselves, this sort of thing. And Europeans tend to be a bit more collectivistic with their culture. But also financial reasons. Europe is very expensive. They tend to have very high prices in Western Europe. They tend to have higher taxes as well than we do here in the U.S. And so moving on your own can be more difficult. And so when it comes to, when's a good age to move out, this chart here shows you over the decades here in the United States for 18 to 29-year-olds. Mind you, this is 18 to 29, and this one here was 18 to 34, but still. You look back pre-World War II, like, 1900 through 1940, it was like 40 to 50%, so, almost half lived with their parents. But as soon as World War II came to an end and went back into the 50s and 60s, it went down to less than a third of young adults living with their parents. And this is the time period when Dave Ramsey would have been growing up back in, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, at that time period. And so back then, less than a third of young adults were living with their parents. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, so, back when he was young, it was normal to get a job at 18, move out on your own, life was affordable, wages were relatively high compared to the cost of rent. But over the decades, you notice the numbers have started creeping up. And it shows here in 2020, it was more than half, the highest it's ever been. Now, mind you, that was during the pandemic lockdowns. It has come down a little bit since then. But still, if, either about half or sometimes more than half of young adults living with their parents, you have to ask yourself, does that mean, an entire generation of young adults just can't live on their own? In which case, that would be a failure of the generation that raised them, because they weren't taught to live on their own. Or is it perhaps the economy is doing so well? Or is it perhaps a combination of the two? And when it comes to young adults, breaking it down to a little further age category, we see 18 to 24-year-olds here. It's 57% are living with their parents. So for under 25-year-olds, that's the majority. Even the 25 to 29-year-olds, you're talking around 22%, and 30 to 34-year-olds around 12%. So by about 30, the vast majority have moved out of their parents' house. So for that age group, it's not a big difference. But for people under 25, one thing I usually recommend is if you're under 25, just don't bother moving out. Life is too expensive. You saw the rent prices there. It's too much. And so when it comes to, at what age should you be moving out? Under 25, I'd say don't even bother. 25, 30, that's probably the age most people should think about. These people we're talking about here are 34, so they're right on the edge of what is and is not a young adult. So even that age, 12% of people that age are still living at home with their parents. So you have to ask yourself, okay, is that a failure of the economy or is that the failure of the parents? Because if they aren't ready to move out, that means the parents didn't raise them right. And yes, we do each bear the individual responsibility for taking care of ourselves. But at the same time, if the parents are the ones that create the problems by not raising them right, they need to create a plan to now teach their children at this age how can they become financially independent. So that would be the main focus here, is instead of talking about kicking them out, we should be talking about, how can we start teaching our children to become independent here in the near future. That's what the discussion should be about.
Exactly. I wish I could.
Why? I just raised my little one and I say my wish came true.
I wish.
No, tell them to leave. I'm serious. It's a heart attack.
Even if they can't afford the rental.
It's Cedar Rapids, Iowa. You're not in.
All right, so when it comes to the rent for Iowa, we look here, it's around $1,200 a month. So that is one of the cheaper states in the U.S. But as a general rule of thumb, rent isn't supposed to be more than about 30% of your take-home pay. So $1,200 times 3 is $3,600 per month, which, for a young adult, that could be a bit. So, even though it is one of the cheaper states out there, you do have to consider other factors as well.
Manhattan, they ain't working much, are they?
They're working full time. They actually have a good job.
What do they make?
One of them makes about 17 an hour. The other one makes 12.
My God, you can make 20 at Target.
So when it comes to average income by age bracket, here it shows us that young adults, under 20 are only making, around $34,000 a year, which is $16 an hour. That's about the income they're making. But they're at 34, and so they're making the same wage as a 19-year-old. And you look at the age 2024, it's around $41,000, so about $20 an hour. And then for the 25 to 34-year-olds, which is the age range we're talking about in today's video, that's almost $60,000 a year, $28 an hour. And so when it comes to rents, you look at the average one-bedroom rent in the U.S. is around $1,700 a month, which is right about $20,000 per year. And if rent is not supposed to be more than 1/3 of your take-home pay, even if you're making $60,000 a year after taxes, rent will be more than 1/3 of your take-home pay. If you're only making $20 an hour, like Dave said, get yourself a job at Target for $20 an hour. I even saw a sign down at the Waffle House offering $20 an hour for the night shift. So you can make $20 an hour quite a few places. So definitely for these young individuals, young adults, I would say you can do better. You can get $20 an hour. Just like I said, Dave is spot on with this point. They can make more money. They should make more money. For under 20 an hour, you really should try for something better. But even if you are making $28 an hour here, rent is going to be a little more than 1/3 of your take-home pay. And so you really have to take into account, okay, what's a good age to move out? Under 25, not really. 25 to 34, somewhere in that age bracket typically works for most people. Because otherwise, if you move out before you're ready, that can create a lot of problems. So you should focus on making an exit plan, saving some money. I know for me, what I did is back when I was in my 20s, I thought, I make enough money. I can afford to move out on my own, but I decided I'm going to live with mom and dad for just a couple of extra years and save up money. And what I did with that money is I bought myself a house. This house behind me here, I bought it for cash. And I don't have a mortgage on a house. I live here completely rent-free, mortgage-free, because I spent several extra years saving up my money by living with my parents, and then I bought a house. That way I never have to waste any more money on rent ever again. The strategy worked very well for me. It can work very well for others as well. And so if you're someone living with their parents, I would say while you're there, focus on making some great money, save it up that way you can afford to move out.
You said they had good jobs.
Those aren't good jobs.
Yeah, no.
What has stunted their growth, do you think?
Or do they have some kind of disability?
Well, one of them has a disability, and he does not drive at all.
What's the nature of his
other one,
disability?
He has basically a mental disability.
Of what type, darling?
He has anxiety, and then he does not drive.
Why does he not drive?
That I've been trying to answer that since I've been married.
Okay, he chose not to drive.
Yes.
But anxiety doesn't keep you from driving.
No.
Okay, now we're not really talking about personal finance anymore. This is more so talking about mental health illnesses. And to be fair, back when Dave Ramsey and the other boomers were young, doctors didn't know how to screen for mental health illnesses. That's why diagnosis rates were a lot lower. Nowadays, for Gen Z millennials, doctors are much better at testing for and screening for mental health illnesses, which is why we see a massive increase in the diagnoses of these types of conditions. When it comes to anxiety, if you aren't safe to drive, you shouldn't be forced to drive. Because if you truly have anxiety that is impairing your ability to drive and someone makes you drive anyways, what could happen is you could become a statistic. Here it shows in 2022, nearly 43,000 people died in the U.S. alone from car accidents. You have to wonder how many of those people had mental health issues. So if you're someone that wants to learn how to drive, instead of just forcing them to drive. First, you should ask yourself, okay, what is the underlying health issue and how are we going to address it? If you're anxious about driving, maybe you get some extra practice. Go find an empty parking lot with no one else in it and practice driving around. Get some extra training, extra coaching, extra practicing. Find out what's causing the anxiety and can it be treated? Are you seeing a doctor for these health issues? And once you've dealt with the underlying health issues, then in a little while you can focus on driving. But if you just sort of kick them out the door, force them out on their own, and they're making $12 an hour, trying to, rent an apartment, like these prices, making $12 an hour, you ain't gonna make it even in Iowa. $12 an hour for $1,200 a month doesn't work out. If you're not ready to drive and you're being forced to drive, that could literally make you one of these statistics. Over 40,000 people are dying every year from car accidents. So the advice Dave Ramsey is giving here could literally kill someone because he just doesn't know much about mental health issues. So before you kick someone out and force them to get a driver's license, and force them to drive, force them to pay on their own, as parents, you need to prepare your children. So these parents have clearly failed their own children. If they're living home at 34 and they're unable to care for themselves that age, that is the fault of the parents who did not teach them. But the solution is also the parents need to teach them from this point moving forward, how should they be independent. And if you are someone in that position, if you are a young adult in your 30s living with your parents, from that I would say, okay, also take ownership, take some individual responsibility and say, my parents did not raise me right. They never taught me how to stay alive. I'm going to take care of that myself. I'm going to teach myself. I'm going to do what I can on my end to become as ready as possible. And so, from my perspective, I've been dealing with a lot of mental health illnesses myself, and I would say I wasn't really a well-adjusted individual until I was about 27 years old. And so it took me a while to the point where I was mentally ready to truly live out on my own. And now here I am, I own my own house, mortgage-free. I'm doing very, very well. And one of the biggest factors that helped me get successful was living with my parents for a couple extra years longer than everyone else. Mind you, I'm not 34 like the two young men in this example here, but sometimes it does take a little bit longer to get off the launch pad than others. That's been my experience, and for others as well. Like, for example, I have an older brother. He moved out of his parents at 22, came back in at 27. He moved back in again at 34, moved back in again at 37. And so whenever he's hit a financial rough patch, he always has a follow-up plan to going back to the parents. And if the parents close the door and never let him move back in, that would be quite a big problem for him because he does need the help sometimes. And so this idea of kicking your children out of the house is really only something for Americans who grew up during the 60s and 70s to really be talking about, because back then it was common to kick them out, but nowadays that just isn't practical. So for this point moving forward, we really should be focusing on helping the young adults to overcome the increased difficulties that we experience today. Like, because the younger generations had it much, or the older generations had it easier. The younger generations have it harder. And here at the Financial Optimist, I'd like to teach about individual solutions. How can you solve the problems instead of waiting for someone else to solve them for you? That's what I'm all about. I'm all about solutions and fixing problems. Instead of just complaining about them, I offer practical solutions. That's what my videos have been about. So let's keep watching here, see what else he has to say.
All right, we need to solve. Number one, let's just go back and answer your question, and you're probably not going to like the answer, but your husband wins.
Okay.
And the answer to your problem is that we need to solve the problem while you're alive to get these young men to a sustainable life so they don't need their mommy and their daddy at 34.
Exactly.
And so...
Okay, so this is where he's saying basically the parents need to continue raising their children. He needs to teach them, or they need to teach their children how to be independent. This is exactly what they should be doing. The parents should be teaching, they should be coaching, they should be mentoring their children how to take care of themselves because they haven't done this. But you have to ask yourself, okay, they're 34. Why didn't this get brought up 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Especially for the one that couldn't drive. If anxiety was keeping them from driving, why wasn't this addressed at 24 instead of at 34? So these parents clearly have had a failure to parent. In addition to the children also not doing as well as they should be, we really have to ask the parents questions, why did you raise your children to be this way?
We need to start working on some career coaching and some work ethic coaching and get them out of the house and let them establish a life of some kind. But they're in their 30s. This is called failure to launch.
And yes, absolutely, this is called failure to launch for the children, but for the parents, it's also a failure to parent. So there's plenty of blame to go around for everyone because there's a lot that's going wrong here. And so if you are a young adult in your 30s living with their parents, I'd say, take ownership and say, hey, my parents didn't raise me well, but I'm going to fix it myself. And if you're someone who is a parent with children in their 30s, from your perspective, I'd say, okay, I recognize I didn't prepare my children for this world. I now need to continue teaching them so that one day they will become ready to leave. So thank you for watching today. If you have any questions, drop it below down in the comment section. Otherwise, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.